Good morning and welcome to today's HiNotes, our very first one to kick off the year of 2025. We're excited this morning to be joined by Dr. Kerri Burchill. She is the president of North Star Coaching, a leadership and development company that specializes in helping leaders slow down to go fast and achieve ambitious goals through coaching, leadership training, and team development. While Kerri is an entrepreneur now, she didn't start off that way. Her career began as a middle school teacher, then administrator, next professor, followed by director of organizational development, and finally to her work now as a speaker, coach, and consultant and facilitator. Along that journey, she has spent 15 years in university with master's degrees in education and human resource management, plus a PhD in educational leadership. Kerri entertains audiences with stories from her experiences living in 3 countries and her insights working with a variety of leaders and industries. Kerri, welcome. We're always excited to have you with Higher Level, and I'm so excited today for what you're bringing to our audience, as these skills, they're always great, and I always love your stories as well. So
thank you.
I'm going to let you go ahead and jump in and get started. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, and it's great to have this first one as 2025. I didn't realize I was #1 this year. That's awesome.
Top of our list.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, Higher Level was my first consulting company, and we still do work together. So that's just like, I love our relationship, Summer, that we can just continue, and Higher Level's like purpose in really impacting and changing people's lives. Like, this kind of offering is just awesome that you do it. So thank you.
Of course.
Great.
Kerri,
well, managing director Aaron Kopek with one.
You had muted yourself. You're back.
Okay. Listen, let me know if that happens again. Maybe when I change the microphone, it is not happy with it. So I was saying that Aaron, the VP of Marketing and Communication with Higher Level, was just on talking with Summer and I before we started, and we were saying that we have a really high enrollment number for this session. So that's great, and it is telling that we are having challenges with employees, difficult conversations, difficult employees. So really today is about empowering you with some very concrete strategies to help you lead those challenging situations. And as I often say, lead out of the ask hole trap. Those employees that ask you to do things, they're not owning their work, they're not engaged, they're asking other people to do their work, and they just kind of cause havoc. So what we can do with those, I'm going to share my screen, kind of go over the game plan for today, and then we're going to jump into some polling just right away. So really want to tweak and adjust as we go along. That education background that I have really has me being really nimble during a presentation like this. So going to get your input in a minute. We're going to understand the catalysts for unwanted behavior, learn some concrete tools that you can use today. We're going to apply them and then have some time for Q&A. We will be using the chat functionality, not the questions, just the chat. So if you have questions, put it in the chat, and later on we'll have a chance for everyone to give us some input in the chat too. All right. So I would like you to, I'm going to share my screen differently. I'm going to ask you this opinion, rank your feelings in the following statements, and we're going to use Mentimeter to do that. So I'm going to drop in a link in the chat so everybody can get at it. 1 second. You know what? I can't do the chat. Okay, hang on for 1 second. Because I'm the presenter, it's not letting me chat. That's interesting. So I can share this QR code. That might be easiest for everybody. If you want to grab this QR code with your phone, then you can quickly access that first question, which is, geez, Summer, I wonder how else I can do this. The functionality, we talked earlier about GoToWebinar. Differently, you can go to menti.com and put in some answers there too. And we are going to start this. Great, so we can see already people's confidence around, I feel confident working with challenging people and I have skills with challenging people. Thanks everybody for just rolling with that. the ease of QR codes, and then kind of difficult if I can't drop it in for you. Excellent. So menti.com and use the code there on the screen. Good. So we're sort of feeling a little above average, which is great, with the confidence and the skills to deal with challenging people. And I really just want to normalize this. The reason why I asked this question is because we all struggle with dealing with challenging people. So if you are the challenging person, you're not on this webinar. And I say that, 10% of the population thrives on conflict. So if you're on this call, you're not part of that 10%, right? We all struggle with this. We're not the ones stirring the pot. We are navigating our confidence and skill. So interesting, 3.3 for both of those. Good. Let's go to the, I'm gonna actually transition us back to the PowerPoint for a second. Let me drop in some more content for us. Okay, so I want to hear from you on why you think leaders find employees challenging. So same thing, you can use that Menti code and have some short answers. So, we see 3.3 on the first question of feeling confident and having the tools, but why? Like, you're gifted leaders, you're the whole package. There are lots of things you do really well. What is the challenge about managing difficult employees? Like, why is that hard for us, do you think? Drop in some answers there would be great. Super. And if you're finding Menti a little bit awkward, you can drop it in the chat too. Whatever works for you. Why do you think that leaders find difficult employees challenging? Like, you have so many skills in other areas. What is up with this? Make it full screen for you here. So if you're having a challenge with this, drop in a comment in the chat for me so we can see where you're at. Good, strong personalities, thank you. Somebody had to crack the ice, I appreciate it. So our first question is really that self-assessment, right? Like, where are you at with your confidence and skills? And this one is putting words on what is that challenge? And I'm going to use your answers from this in the rest of our time together as we sort of think about what makes difficult employees challenging. So their strong personalities, oh gosh, they affect the whole atmosphere. Yeah, I've got a story for you about that. They avoid conflict, right? So you can't even, it's hard to engage with them because either they avoid conflict or as the leader you do. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because those employees cause so much conflict for us as leaders, right? So it's ironic that leaders often do avoid conflict because they're not part of that 10% that thrive on conflict. All right, I see you're a little shy today chatting. We're going to do lots of interaction stuff, so warm up with me. I want your engagement and purposely really pulling you in so that we're not multitasking and you're like with us and really contributing. So yeah, there's the fear of losing employees. I talk with leaders about how sometimes the employees are holding us hostage, right? We're short-shifted, short-handed, confrontation with others, right? You hold someone accountable, the difficult employee, and then they talk about you behind your back. They might be hard to approach. And it's not always a hard line issue, right? It might be difficult to nail down exactly what the issue is and where they are causing the strife. Well said. Yeah, pinpointing that issue is challenging, and they wiggle away like they're this slippery fish, right? You sort of talk loosely about a challenge, and if it's not concrete enough, then they don't want to own it because they always have an excuse or reason that involves someone else. Yep. And the balance is challenging, not coming across as overbearing and leaning in with empathy, right? We want to understand what their challenge is that's making them difficult, but I still need to hold them accountable to move forward. Absolutely. Good. So in my work, these are some examples of behaviors that really impact how people show up. So 30% of employees are thriving. Wow. So you think about difficult employees, that constitutes the other 70%. 40% of employees feel stressed, right? Now, conversely, managers, 41 feel stressed. So when we think about holding employees accountable and dealing with their difficult behavior, you know, you might have a counterpart or a colleague who lets their employees get away with it. So you're trying to hold difficult employees accountable. You have a colleague who's maybe feeling stressed and not all that engaged because of their stress. 23% of employees are engaged and only 30% of managers. So you're here today because you are that 30%. Thank you. We need you. And your life and work is going to be streamlined if we have strategies to deal with these difficult employees. Interestingly, 20% of employees feel lonely a lot of the day. And only 25% when they work from home, it's a little bit higher. So we think about difficult employees. Well, if they're feeling lonely, right, that last comment somebody had about having empathy, right? So if we think about what's causing the difficult employee's behavior, well, is it stress? Is it engagement? Is it loneliness? 49% of the US and Canada report to actively seeking a new job. So you also talked about that in your comments, right? That we're kind of afraid they're going to leave, right? Half of your population is on that tipping point. So all of those things really make you lean in as a leader, servant leader. You want to be there for them. You want to support them. You want to serve them so that their difficult behaviors, you know, get addressed and managed. Well, of course, right? You see their stress, you see their loneliness. You know, what do servant leaders do in response to these stats? You work harder. And so that's the challenge, right? Is we do all of this effort to mitigate difficult behaviors, and you're the one working the hardest. And that's the shift that really needs to happen, right? Servant leadership is not being a servant. It's really holding people accountable. So we know that stress and loneliness and poor behavior causes employees to spin, right? And that's the day-to-day pressure, right? They're not performing well, they're not behaving well, they're not meeting metrics. So when employees are spinning and they're stressed and they're having difficult behavior, chat in what you see their behaviors. Like, what do they do when they're spinning? Use the functionality on the chat this time. Keeping you on your toes, just changing it up, stimulating different ways of communicating with you. Yeah, when you see that difficult behavior, what is it? And Summer, maybe I'm missing something. You let me know if there are chats coming in that I'm not seeing on my side.
I'm not seeing any come in through the chat.
All right. This is a slow to warm up crowd, but I'm trusting that they're going to lean in and be engaged. And this is normalizing, right? What does that look like? I just want to spend a minute with everybody to sort of say, okay, we're sort of so-so on our skills and confidence. We see our employees and how they show up, but we maybe struggle with conflict, or maybe as leaders, we're worried that they might leave. It's hard to pinpoint the issue. These kinds of challenges come up, and let's drill down a little more to sort of say, what behaviors do you see with those difficult employees? As you're thinking of answers, I'm going to give you a story from last night. We had a community event last night, and I'm just going to stop sharing my screen here to look at everybody while you're adding in your chat. So I live in downtown San Antonio, and they're creating some new construction on a major road coming in and out of the community. So it's not an interstate, but just a 4-lane road. And so there was a community meeting to explain what was happening. Now, you know those community meetings, right? You get a mixture of people in there, and everybody has their competing agenda of what they want. And sure enough, you see difficult behaviors. And I was just so compassionate for the moderator who was trying to answer this one person's question. So he really wanted the power lines to be buried underground, right? And the moderator explained that it's $1 million a mile to bury underground things. The man in the crowd, well, that would really look better, and I really think you should talk about or investigate whether or not we can bury those, because I know that it's not that hard. I've talked to people, and I've worked with the different agencies that you would have to work with in order to bury the cables under. And he just went on, and the moderator was really even-keeled, very unfazed. And he said, well, we have railroads, and CP Rail won't let us put things underground there. Well, you really should think about it. I've worked with them, and it was easy. Just on and on. And you can feel the crowd going, oh, somebody shut this person down. Difficult behavior, right? What's that spinning behavior look like? They perseverate on something and they just stick to it over and over and over again. That man was difficult behaviors. He was just spinning about his one topic, not listening to anything that was coming back at him. Other moderators started chiming in. Like the whole room was getting a bunch of anxiety about this interaction, and nobody was really dealing with the behavior. Ultimately, the moderator said, well, if you'd like to have a side conversation about this, we can. And in my head, I thought, one, I'd love to coach the moderator on this. Two, who's working the hardest, right? The moderator wasn't controlling him well with the crowd, and then is going to have a sidebar conversation. So he's going to get cornered with this community member for like a half an hour after the meeting. Like, who's the servant leader? What does that look like? And how do you sort of manage some of those difficult behaviors? So I see that we're having a quiet group. I'm going to keep us moving along here. If you do want to chat in some of your
Hey,
comments.
Kerri.
Yeah.
We realize they don't have the option to use the chat feature, and it is coming in through questions. I'm not sure if you can see those, but I've got some of them pulled up here. I can read to you.
I love it. Thank you.
So many managers seem to want to avoid conflict. I think that might have been from the very beginning. Complaints. Employees seem to disconnect, pull away, not engage, delayed arrivals, forgetfulness, anger,
right?
yes, anger, frustration, withdrawal, poor attendance, disengagement, performance issues. Employees become very defensive and attempt to justify their actions with an outpour of problems they're experiencing, doing the blame game, repeated mistakes, complaining.
Perfect. Thanks everybody for figuring out where you could contribute. Awesome. I cannot see them, Summer, so if you want to tag team with me and keep doing that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I sure will.
Okay, perfect. Well, you were reading some of those things, right? Complain, blame, gossip, low productivity, drama, passive aggressive behaviors. They talk behind your back, and sometimes they're just mean, right? So this makes them difficult, and it makes us as leaders a bit reluctant to dive into that because these are slippery behaviors to address. So let's kind of talk about the spin. So they might bring a complaint to you of something. So for example, with this community meeting last night, you know, the complaint that this community member brought was we should have the power lines underground. Well, what's the real issue that he came with, right? The guy doesn't have a place in his life to have real power. He doesn't feel like his voice matters. He just ran for political office and didn't get it, so he's trying to put his stake in the ground at some community. Who knows, right? But we as leaders want to transition people that are spinning at the top of the spin, showing that bad behavior, and get them to identify what the real issue is that is causing that unwanted behavior. So I kind of talk about spinning employees in this way, right? So they might bring an issue to you because they're not engaged, they're lonely, they're looking for other work, all of the stats that we just looked at. And so they might bring a problem to you like, hey, I know that we're not allowed to take time off after Thanksgiving, but I really need to go see my brother because he's just had a baby or something, right? Well, you're compassionate, you're kind, you might add a fix of, oh, this one time, maybe you let it happen. Well, then, sure enough, next Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever, somebody wants different time off. And we're constantly in this issue fix thing because we haven't really dealt with the issue, which is, you know, maybe this person wanting to do a last minute visit with their family, they haven't been able to save well, or they haven't had a great relationship with them. There's something on the surface of this. Maybe they're burning out. You know, what makes them need to visit their siblings at Thanksgiving, some of the busiest travel time in the year, right? But we accommodate them and we try to fix whatever issue is thrown at us. And then we just get more difficult behavior as a result of that. So we want to break out of this sort of issue fix pattern. So the tough truth when we think about dealing with difficult behaviors is that relationships are co-created. So if that relationship is difficult, you own part of why it's difficult. Yeah. So let's, you know, kind of talk about that, right? So we have, you know, a car that's broken down metaphorically. You know, the driver owns some of why the car is broken down. It ran out of gas, it ignored engine light warnings, something, right? So if there is bad behavior in an employee, you're part of that relationship. And so thinking introspectively as we go through this on how you've maybe interacted with some of those employees or the behaviors, or dealt with them or not dealt with them. So somewhere in there, the behavior pattern that's happening is co-created. That's just a tough truth I want to call out as we navigate on this. So the crux of the two things that we're really diving into today is we are going to do active listening and asking great questions. So, you know, Summer, I've talked about active listening a million times. This is like the hardest soft skill there is out there. So we're going to spend a chunk of time on active listening, and then we'll talk about asking questions. So you can actively listen three ways. Repeat their words, like literally parrot, paraphrase, reflect what you hear them saying. You can also share your observations about their behavior. And then you can kind of put words on what you think they're thinking. They maybe haven't found the courage for yet. So all three of these things are really valid ways of active listening. There's not a right or wrong way to do it, but you want to really help the person hear or see how they're showing up. And then we want to ask open-ended questions. So I'm going to stop here for a second, and Summer and I are going to do some role playing. And then we're going to, so Summer, if you want to put yourself on camera with me, that would be great.
I'm back.
Awesome. Okay, so Summer's going to be a difficult employee. So we had those examples of people not coming into work on time, people being passive aggressive, people creating drama, like getting other people going. So can you think of maybe something that you've heard just generically people are not happy about? I'm going to be the leader. Summer's going to be the difficult employee, and I'm going to actively listen to her words, her behavior, or kind of what she might be ruminating on but just hasn't found the words for yet. So come to me with an issue, and I'm going to not be the servant leader of fixing everything. And just tangentially, servant leadership in its true definition is really when you grow people and help them develop their capacity. So long term, I'm trying to help in servant leadership ways these difficult employees, you know, change their behaviors. But I'm not going to do the jump in and fix it servant leadership stuff. All right, Summer. So come to me with a complaint that.
Well, Kerri, I'm here every day at 7:55. We start work at 8 o'clock, but I know Sam comes in every day at 8:15, and I don't know why they get to come in at 8:15 every day when I'm here at 7:55 and nobody does anything about it. We start at 8.
Yeah, so this is my active listening part. So you're really seeing this pattern somewhere where you're coming in early and you see that Sam is coming in later and nothing really happens.
No, I don't know why they think they get to come in late every day. We start at 8. Why aren't they on time?
Yeah, so you're really frustrated at the different standard for Sam and for yourself.
Yeah, if we're expected to be here on time, why can't they make it here on time? Why isn't anybody doing anything about it?
Yeah, so you, from your side of the fence, are not seeing anything done about that.
No, they just get to walk in anytime they want. Nobody says anything, but our
Yeah.
work day starts, and I'm having to do extra work answering phones because they're not here on time.
Okay, so outside of the double standard, kind of some people in your perception are able to come in later and you have to come in on time, but it's really this challenge that you have of the unfairness of having to do all the phones until Sam wanders in.
Yeah, I mean, we all have the expectation that it's a full work day, and they cut time out of it every day and leaves at the same time I do.
So you're feeling a bit taken advantage of.
Yeah, I am.
So you see how we spin down there. Now, Samantha or Summer doesn't know that Sam actually works, you know, a half an hour later after because she's got to drop her kids into daycare. Summer doesn't need to know all that. It's not her business, right? But she needs to feel heard that not only is there a double standard, but she's feeling taken advantage of, right? And once we get to the bottom of the spin, that's where the open-ended questions start happening. So, you know, you can sense when you're at the bottom of the spin because Summer's done ranting. Like she's not saying anything else. When I say like, so you're feeling taken advantage of. And like, yeah, it's not fair. Okay. taken advantage of, not fair, kind of same word, same thing, right? So I know that we've hit the bottom of the spin because Summer's kind of saying the same stuff over and over, and there's nothing deeper coming out of it. So that's when I transition to ask open-ended questions. So I'm going to say to Summer, because I could tell her that Sam stays 30 minutes later, and I could triangulate myself, but what I really want to have happen is that Summer and Samantha start building a better collegial relationship, right? I don't want Summer to be, you know, I bet that Summer's like, ugh, whenever Sam comes in. I bet that Summer's not as cooperative because she's mad at Sam for coming in 15 minutes late, like all of those things. But what I really want to have happen is that there's a better relationship and that Samantha and Summer have a conversation, not me having the conversation for them. So that's where the open-ended questions come in. So after I've identified what the bottom of the spin is, I'm going to say to Summer, so you feel taken advantage of, you know, what does Sam say when you talk to her about that?
Sam says that she has to drop her kids off and that really she can't get here any earlier and she gets here as fast as she can.
Well, it sounds like you've heard from Sam why she comes in 15 minutes late. I'm asking what she says about you feeling taken advantage of.
She apologizes and she says that, you know, she really is sorry about it, but there's just not much she can do.
So in this, what's in your control, Summer, that you want to see happening? Right. Like just pausing for the audience, right? She's now stuck because she knows she's being around. And you just said there's nothing that Sam can do when you talk to her about it. So I'm going to challenge Summer's difficult behavior. You know, so you're not happy with this. Sam's identified that, you know, she can't do anything about it. She's apologized to you. What's in your control at this point, Summer?
My own attitude towards it.
Well, let's spend a minute talking about the attitude then. You know, what kind of attitude do we really want here at higher level?
People who are, you know, looking out for each other, people who are wanting to be great coworkers and have each other's back, get the job done at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the kind of person that we want. So I'm still going to active listen, right? To give Summer credit. Like, yeah, that is the kind of team member we want. We really want people who are engaged and have each other's back. So if I talk to your teammates right now, given the frustration and sort of you not feeling like things are fair and that you're being taken advantage of, how would they describe you as a team member right now?
They would say that I help them when I can, and that while they'd probably say I get my own job done first, but there are areas where I can help them more.
So in this, I would call Summer out a little bit, right? Because she's going to be like, "Oh, I'm perfect. I'm not a difficult employee," and I'm going to call her out and say, "Well, it's interesting that you sort of see yourself being a team player and you're doing everything and you're, you know, what we really want at higher level. Yet you started this conversation complaining and talking about someone behind their back." So that's active listening to the behavior. Right? And I'm going to challenge Summer because she's going to give me the sunshine and roses, the right answer, difficult behavior, not owning it, slippery fish behavior. And I'm going to call her out because invariably, when you start actively listening to people and then you have the open-ended questions and you kind of go back to active listening, you're going to have a space in there where the other person shows some difficult behavior. And so use the interaction as much as you can to like catch it in the moment. So I'm going to say to Summer, you know, I'm really glad that you know you see yourself as a team member. I also want to challenge you because you started this conversation, and I'm going to describe her behavior. So let's just pause there and kind of go into some nitty-gritty skills. Thanks very much. Round of applause for Summer doing that. So two really powerful skills are active listening. These three ways, right? Repeating the words, share your observations about their behavior, or think what they're thinking. So at no point did Summer use the words taken advantage, but I could, in that third example, I knew that's what she was feeling, but just didn't have the words for yet, right? So you can help and kind of speed along. And that interaction, if you looked at the time, was a couple minutes long, right? It doesn't have to be Herculean, these hour-and-a-half power struggle conversations that we sometimes get ourselves stuck in with difficult employees. When you actively listen and they feel heard and you can identify what the bottom of the spin is, then you can move forward with those open-ended questions. So the best open-ended questions are what and how. We want to avoid why. It has a long tail. Why just kind of creates blame, judgment. So if I said to Summer, well, why didn't you say these things to Sam? Well, right, it's just put her more on defense. We start the spin all over again. So it's funny in this, right? You're all promoted because you're great leaders. And I'm going to say, ironically, don't use your talents, right? You're good at fixing. Don't. I could have gone and talked to Sam, or I could have told Summer what Sam's deal was. No, make the other people do the work. They have to manage their difficult behavior. So don't fix it. And when you ask those questions, don't make it leading questions. For example, backdoor fixing might look like, when do you think you could talk to them? Right? That's like kind of indirectly fixing it, but with a what or a when in front. What are your next steps? Another example is, what do you think of joining the committee? Where does this collaboration fit? Did the meeting cover the process you will use versus what did you learn from the meeting? So in all of these kind of better questions, you're giving the person a space to show up. So when I asked Summer, what did Sam say when you talked to her? For sure that needed to happen, but I didn't say, what did Sam say when you told her that you were feeling taken advantage of? I didn't lead it that way, right? So you want to keep it open as much as possible so that the person shows up and you have more things you can listen to. So
Kerri, we did have a question come in.
Sure.
Sorry.
No.
And it says, while a solid example of active listening, many real-world conversations like this result in "I don't know" being the answer to the questions. Would you recommend handling differently or moving to the say what you think they are trying to say stage?
So if the person says, I don't know, there's a couple of ways you can tackle that. You can say, let me stop sharing here for a second. You can actively listen, like, it's interesting that this is causing you so much grief and you're struggling to pinpoint what it is. Let it sit. So don't let them off the hook with the I don't know line. That is such a cop-out. So push a little more in the active listening. And you can even say to them, well, how about this? Let's meet tomorrow morning. Let's get a cup of coffee together. And I'll give you some time to think about what that might be. And then meet the next day. Now, if you see that they're like crying or they're holding their breath or they're doing some nonverbal stuff, because 93% of our communication is nonverbal, you can say to them, just even as you say you don't know, you're holding your breath. That tells me that you know something that there's just a hesitation to say. Spit it out. And you can nudge them into dealing with some of that stuff. The trick is, if you sort of jump to putting words on what they don't yet have the confidence to say, is sometimes as leaders we jump like way up here. So if someone comes to me and says like, oh, my partner's really angry with me, and you've known for years that maybe they're going to separate. Like if I actively listened and said, wow, it sounds like you're really heading towards separation. I mean, that's like too much of a jump. This person isn't ready to do that yet. So when you put words on what they say, it needs to be the baby steps and not the baby in the bathwater. Yeah, good. Feel free to follow up with another question if that was a beginning of another thing you wanted to talk about. So the spinning employee is really them and you're the leader, right? And the whole trick in active listening and asking questions is to get them talking so that they hear or see their spin and talk themselves to the bottom of the spin. So you are going to yo-yo, right? What are your next steps? They're going to say something, more active listening, more questions. So you just want to keep that yo-yo going. You always have to start with active listening though. Leaders invariably skip that step, super important. So you want to help get to the bottom with the questions, but you have to listen. Leading questions, also using your talents, but don't. Can you get that done by Friday? You get stuff done. That's why you've been promoted. Not helpful, right? What timeline is reasonable? And then you negotiate. But if they're saying, February 28th, and you need it done by Friday, well, isn't that interesting that they're not showing up? And then you can actively listen to the behavior. It's interesting that I've just talked about the urgency of this project, and your timeline is, a month and a couple of days from now. Wow, you're not getting this. Like, I can just see that in your response. So that better questions are open because it gives them a space to show up, and then you get back to this, spinning in the leader thing, right? So another leading question is, do you know where to find the policy on that? Like, you're really telling them you should be following, no, what resources will guide your actions? And they'll say, well, I can go and talk to Summer because she's a rock star. And you'll say, well, that's interesting when you're going for someone's opinion when we have a policy book. And you're just observing to them not doing it, but you're not telling them what to do. What attitude is expected at higher level? How will you live up to the attitude expected here, right? Okay, good. So they're going to have answers. You're going to do more active listening, more questions. And Summer and I just applied the skill. So I kind of want to pause here for a second and just give us a space to have more Q&A. We want to try to keep these under 45 minutes for you. But while they're doing that, you can order Leading Out of the ASCO book that goes into more topics, or a handbook if you're not much of a reader. It's, I think, 86 activities in there. And if you want to assess really how much time are you spending with those difficult behaviors, this 2-minute ASCO trap quiz is just super fun to sort of help you diagnose a little bit of what might be happening in your leadership. So I'm pausing there, Summer, to see if we have some questions. And I want to just give everyone a little bit of time to either express what a takeaway is or what the opportunity is for you, or questions. We have such a quiet group this morning. I'm totally intrigued with that. I will talk a little bit about the active listening piece and just its power. So if you think about performance evaluation, or you're giving a difficult employee feedback, it's really nice to actively listen to the behaviors and state them as fact, right? Like, you interrupted Summer 3 times in the meeting. You didn't say, I think that you didn't make it an opinion, you said fact. You interrupted Summer 3 times. That's a difficult behavior. Actively listen to what they do versus you should really try not to interrupt people, or you should be like, you're telling them, versus just stating fact of, you interrupted, Summer 3 times in the meeting. Or get them talking with the open-ended question. So let's say that they're having the meeting after the meeting, right? So you've given a vision, you've communicated some expectations, the whole group, whatever, and this person starts going around and talking to everyone after the meeting about the meeting, gossiping. You can say, well, how many people did you talk to after the meeting? Well, I'm not allowed to talk to people? Well, it's interesting you're defensive when I ask that. Well, I'm not defensive. And keep listening to the behavior, right? Well, I've just asked how many people and you haven't answered my question yet. So yeah, that's defensiveness. And not get triggered, not enter the power struggle, not defend where you're coming from, just state fact and ask more questions, state fact in what you observe and ask more questions.
Kerri, I know you and I have talked about this several times, but just the pause afterwards that is so hard. That, I think, is almost the hardest thing. Like, say what you need to say, state the fact, and then count.
Yep.
And
literally,
see.
You're right, Summer, like in your head, like, I'll count 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, like, it's so painful. Count to 12, believe it or not, because that person's spinning, right? They're trying to collect all these random thoughts and stories and things going on in their head. They need you counting silently with the pause for them to sort of grab the relevant stuff to drill down to the bottom of that spin. I love that you brought that up, Summer. Yeah, that's so powerful. I should add that to a slide next time.
It's one of the hardest things, and it just makes them really that uncomfortable. Like, they're just looking at me. I've got to say something else, and those the word vomit comes out, I guess.
Yeah. So being able to say to someone, well, it's interesting that you're saying you're not defensive, but you haven't answered the question yet. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3. And just wait it out. Give them a space to show up. Actively listen to their behaviors, their words, what you sort of anticipate them saying, ask a question, active listen, give them a space to show up. And if they're difficult employees, they will show up with more difficult behaviors that you can then pinpoint and then come in with the expectation of that's not acceptable here. Just fact.
We did have a question come in. It says, in a very high-paced environment with high delivery expectations, how do you navigate ensuring the work gets done when you suspect your staff may be approaching burnout? The work must still get done.
Yeah, I mean, burnout is a funny thing, right? The antidote to burnout is control. So they're spinning out of control, and what they need is more control, right? But they're not slowing down to kind of think about what that is. So starting the conversation with them, saying, hey, we work in a fast-paced environment. It's a fact. We have high deliverables, super high demands on productivity. It's a fact. And burnout's real. Fact, right? Where are you at with this? And just sit with it. You know, what's contributing to where you're at? Listen to them, ask questions, listen, ask questions, and see if you can drill down to what is the thing causing them burnout. Is it this team isn't collaborating with them? Is it that they're putting in new processes, but nobody follows it? Is it they never really get clear direction from senior leadership? Like, what is causing the spin that contributes to the burnout? And if they can put words on what that is at the bottom, and then figure out how to control that or let it go, you know, even letting go is a sense of control. You know, that's the conversation that needs to happen. Burnout happens because we don't have things in control. It's just mayhem all the time. And you can have a really fast-paced environment. I work with lots of like really dynamic industries, and you can have high-paced, fast-paced environments that are still healthy because we've had these conversations. We actively listen to each other. We, you know, say, hang on a second, we need to slow down and just think about this for a second longer.
Kerri, I don't see any other questions coming in at this time. I think hopefully everybody's an expert on this now.
Right. My grandma's 105, and I swear she still practices active listening. Like, this is a lifelong skill. We're not ever going to be masters, but boy, it is a game changer personally and professionally if you can really lean in to just listening back to what people say. It slows them down because often I'm going to rant and I don't even really hear what I'm saying. I don't hear how I come across because I'm spinning. I'm showing those difficult behaviors. But when you hold up a mirror by active listening, what, Kerri? Wow, I don't want to be like that. Yeah, I was frustrated yesterday. Here's really what I'm frustrated about. Yeah. Anyway, I will follow up with everybody. I'll share the link with the Ask Cool Trap and add you to my weekly communications too, so we can just keep the conversation going.
Of course, and this has been recorded, so we will be sending out the recording to everybody that has been enrolled. Make sure you go online and get your continuing education credits if you are here for that today as well. Coming up November 11th, we will be having a new series that we are starting, and this is going to be about the developmental growth with your team and how you can track that, what they're expecting, what they're looking for, and just some of the things that you can be offering to them. That's February 11th at 11. And if you're on here today, you are going to be receiving communication about that in your email. So that is coming. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Kerri, once again for being here.
Yep.
Always enjoy my time with you.
Thanks, Summer. Me too.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.